Good to see you all. Thank you all. Welcome to the February edition of the Backstage Community Session. As a general reminder before we dive in, this meeting is recorded and it's going to be published later on YouTube. My name is Mihai. I'm an engineering manager in Backstage in the open source, and I'm going to be your facilitator today. This is the February edition, incidentally the shortest month of the year. I just realized also it's a leap year. So for those of you or friends or family that celebrate birthdays on the 29th, today is, in a few days on the 29th, it's going to be one of those days that comes every 4 years. We are also 1 month away from BackstageCon in Paris, where I hope and we hope to see as many of you. Certainly, a large chunk of our folks working on the open source will be there. So we're very, very excited to see you in Paris. As I mentioned earlier, also Paris is a wonderful city to visit in the spring. We've got quite a bit of an agenda for today, a decent size. We've got Patrick covering the release in a little bit. We're going to have Preben, I believe, covering the auth changes. I'm going to touch base quickly on the SIGs, and then I believe Zach, I hope you're in the call. You're going to cover a couple of custom plugins from SeatGeek, and then Andre will give us an update on the CNCF documentation review. That said, given that we've just had the 1.23 release shipped yesterday, I'm tossing it over to Patrick.
All right. Hello. So yeah, this release was a bit of a calm before the storm, you could say. There's no big features going out, but there's still a couple of different good things shipped. So in particular, we saw improved support for the new backend systems, new auth modules being migrated, more support for Scaffolder module, which is nice to see, and there's a bit more coming in the next release too. The events backend in particular is about to get an update that makes it work much better with a new backend system. And we have some Kubernetes plugin updates. I encourage you to go check the Kubernetes, both the changelog and the Kubernetes changelog. If you are using the Kubernetes plugin, there are a couple new requirements now when it comes to uniqueness of configured clusters and other things. So just a heads up for that. And same thing, if you're using Gerrit, the Gerrit integration, that now requires Git tiles. There is an escape patch for that right now, but our goal is to basically deprecate and remove support for Gerrit integrations that do not use the Git tiles APIs, because they are a lot nicer and more powerful to build integrations with compared to just plain Git protocol integrations with Gerrit. Yep, so I said calm before the storm. I'm going to take the next one as well, Mihai, so you can throw it over to the next slide. Preben had a conflict for the beginning of this meeting. So we have been hard at work for some upcoming auth changes. So in particular, this the intent here is to implement what is currently this script in the contrib folder and make that supported in the framework. So this means that you will essentially be able to deploy Backstage facing the internet and be reasonably confident that nothing bad is going to happen. And I say reasonably because our, for example, DDoS protection isn't going to be industry class or anything like that. If you're, it will still be good to have it behind some other proxy like you would in a regular service, but it is no longer a requirement. So especially this makes it a lot easier to just get going with Backstage. You don't need to be too worried about how you set up the auth when you start out. Now, along with this, there are a couple of changes. We really wanted to roll this out as an opt-out rather than opt-in for plugins. So for all plugins using the new backend system, once we're on the next release, 1.24, they are all going to be protected by default. Meaning all requests have to be authenticated. And it's going to be up to plugins to opt out of that behavior and add their own auth policies that allow unauthenticated requests through if that is needed. Looking through the plugins in the main repository, there aren't too many that need this, but there's a few. And even things like health check endpoints, you would need to add an explicit policy that allows external access. There's a lot more details on this in the auth service migration guide that is already up on the microsite. It will be populated throughout the month before we hit the release as well, along with more documentations for these different services. There's not a link here, but maybe we can grab it. The design of this whole new system is in BEP number 3. So I'm going to drop that in the chat afterwards as well for those interested in how this is designed. Yep, as part of this, there's also a set of auth services. We replaced existing identity and token manager services with a couple of new services. I won't go into details there, but that is something that requires a migration of plugin code, which is also covered in the migration guide. And all of the plugins in the main repo are migrated as part of this work as well. So for all those plugins, we'll have immediate support once 1.24 rolls out. Yep, that's it. I'll link the design doc in the chat.
Thank you, Patrick. 1.24, that is the Backstage Con release. Code name.
It is indeed.
For that. Cool. If there are more questions, we do have a Q&A at the end. Otherwise, feel free to also interrupt now if there's anything that you have off the top of mind. If not, reminder we have a Q&A at the end if you want to follow up in there. Cool. I'll pick up the next slide before I move the baton away. In an effort to engage better with you and the broader community in driving some of the project areas forward, we just recently spun up 2 new SIGs that I wanted to make sure you're all aware. The first one is the Backstage Community Plugin SIG. We spun up this new SIG to pretty much brainstorm ways to spread the maintenance of plugins and to foster ownership in the long run. The first SIG happened last Tuesday with some of the Backstage folks in Red Hat doing the initial brainstorming in there. If you're interested in this, feel free to join. They are happening bi-weekly. I want to make sure I'm getting the time zones right, at 3 p.m. on Central Europe time. Pretty much they're alternating with the catalog counterpart SIG in there. And then the second one is the Scaffolder SIG. Similarly to the above, we want to foster the synergies around all of the Scaffolder feature work going forward. Our first official SIG is going to happen this coming Friday. So similarly, bi-weekly Friday at 3 p.m. Hopefully I got the time zones right. They're up into the calendar, so the ones in Discord should be up to speed and up to date as well. So please, if you're interested in any of this, feel free to drop by. That said, thank you for that. 1 second, let me admit more people into the room. And then I think I'm tossing this to Zach.
Awesome. Thank you, Mihai.
Did you want me to, Norris, do you want me to stop sharing if you want to grab the screen, or?
I'd love to share the screen.
Wonderful. Let me stop. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Is this looking good for everybody?
Yep.
Cool. So my name is Zach Hammer. I'm a software engineer on the developer experience team at SeatGeek. And today I just wanted to talk about some of the plugins we've started to open source to kind of give back to the community and see what folks are interested in and kind of keep this ball rolling forward. Before I go into the plugins themselves, I just wanted to do a really quick overview on how SeatGeek uses Backstage, just so folks can know how we're using Backstage internally. These slides are super quick. So we use Backstage right now as our software catalog. We use TechDocs pretty heavily. We use Backstage for software and resource creation with the Scaffolder plugin. Backstage is where our standards consolidation and also standards checking lives to make sure that our systems are all up to par on our recent best practices. And we kind of see Backstage as our touch point to the rest of our platform, which doesn't, people are using a lot of different platform tools at SeatGeek, but when you're in Backstage, it should give you that access to the parts of the platform at SeatGeek that you need to interact with, run your systems, provision infrastructure, things like that. just for a bit of data, we use Datadog Rum to get analytics on our Backstage instance. On a given weekday, we have about 80 users on the Backstage platform. Over a 2-week period, we have about 225 unique users who are going to be on Backstage. That's over half of our engineering organization. And according to Rum, the average session duration Backstage is about 20 to 21 minutes. Right now, our big focuses are on building interactive widgets for our platform tooling that we want to kind of progressively open source, which means that people might use Argo CD as a UI to deploy their Kubernetes applications. But if you're just looking at a very quick overview of the status of your system, maybe you want to do quick actions like restart or revert a deploy, that you can do that right through Backstage. And then if you want to do a deeper dive, you can jump into the Argo CD UI. So we're trying to get that balance of how a widget lives within SeatGeek without kind of replicating other UIs, but also giving that familiar home base to work on tools. We're improving our catalog automation. Instead of people having to list every single resource and service in a system through catalog info YAML files, we're doing a lot to pull these resources from the rest of our platform tools, like the AWS catalog and things like that. And just generally, we're trying to make Backstage feel like home more for users by kind of building out a more personalized, user-tailored UI. And as we've worked on that, we've built a bunch of plugins, and we kind of thought it was a good time to open source what we've built and what's generalizable to the community. Before I show those plugins, just want to shout out, obviously, this is the work of a team. This is the developer experience team from our Backstage page. Some of these folks are on the call, and the only reason I have Joao separately is because this shows members. Joao is the director of our team, so I had to screenshot him and pull him over here. But we also want to make it one day that on our teams we can see the manager, so that's a little clearer to users. So some of these folks are even on the call, and some folks you might see on the Backstage repo and other SIGs and stuff like that. So without further ado, I'm going to go into our, one sec, this Zoom toolbar is a little bit in the way. Our repository. This is SeatGeek/Backstage plugins. Right now, this is where we're putting the plugins we're open sourcing. They're not SeatGeek specific plugins. Like, it's not like we have a plugin for buying tickets to live events through the Backstage portal. But kind of when we started building these, there was an advisory on the Backstage community, on the Backstage repository, cautioning against adding new plugins there. But I was actually just at that community plugin special interest group last week, where there's going to be a more centralized place for community plugins. So right now, all of our work is living here. It's let us build at our own rate.
Zach, I'm going to cut you off for a second. Are you sharing the right tab? It looks like we can only see the slideshow.
Oh, let me switch that then. Thank you. That is Matt. So thanks for helping me out there.
No problem.
I'm just going to share this desktop then. Can you see this?
Yep, it's all
Awesome. Yeah, so this is where our plugins live in SeatGeek Backstage plugins. And again, moving forward, some of these things, we'll figure out the right place for these to live, but they are currently in our SeatGeek repo, and they're all deployed to the SeatGeek scope on NPM. So all of these can be downloaded on NPM. And if you go to our user, you can see our plugins deployed here. And I'm just trying to see if I have any notes that I wanted to cover. So I'll just start walking through the plugins we have available. It's not too many now. There are others on the way. We just wanted to get out what we had ready. And some of these are kind of more back-end catalog related modules and plugins. And those are a little bit harder to demo. So for the ones that are more front-end focused, we have a demo site. It's not hosted anywhere, but if you clone the repo and run yarn install on yarn dev, you'll be able to interact with some of the plugins we have here. So I'll start with the awards plugin. The awards plugin was created by our director, Joao. We wanted ways to kind of celebrate the work people do at SeatGeek in our developer portal. So the idea is, let's say if somebody does a really great job pairing with you, or lends a hand on an important project, or contributes to open source, or is on call during a really stressful week, but like saves the company from a massive incident, we might have like the on-call hero award, and we'll say for people who have done a great job in stressful times keeping our infrastructure running. You can upload a logo here. It'll also just like find a random logo to use, and I don't have anything set up to upload, so let's just use this little picture, but usually we kind of deck out fun logos for these. And in the SeatGeek theme, live entertainers, let's say that Bad Bunny and let's say, I'm gonna assume that Bad Bunny, Taylor Swift, and LeBron James all have at certain points manage pretty stressful situations on the scale they are as celebrities, and I'll save that award. Now, if we had our user avatars ingested, we would see this in a very kind of more personalized way. And then if I'm ever looking at LeBron James as I'm scrolling through users, I can see all the awards that LeBron has won. So you kind of deck out this awards page as time goes on. Again, this was a hackathon project that we've just done a little bit of improvement on to get it more production ready, but people are already having a lot of fun with it, and there's a lot of improvements we'd like to see along the way, like posting these out to Slack. Right now, images are saved as like data binaries, data blobs, which make them kind of forced to be very small, but we want to get an S3 integration there. So yeah, very fun way to recognize people's work and kind of have the community doing this. The next plugin I'll show, and this really builds on top. It's a plugin, but it's a lot of just kind of glue on our side of a ton of work from the community. We use the Scaffolder not only for creating new repositories, we also use it for like creating resources for existing repositories. And something folks have always wanted is the ability to use the Scaffolder right from other entity from where you're creating one of these resources. I'm always worried when I present this that it seems like something that'll land in Backstage eventually, but for now, this is what we use. So if I'm in the Backstage repo and I want to create a Postgres database, I can run that whole flow right from within the entity page. And if I go to the tickets system, and if I just go and inspect the entity, you'll see that it has the language label set to Python. And we'll actually see specific templates based on what system you're running. So here, we're not only saying create a Postgres database that's generic to any system, we're also having a create Python module created by the Python Language Guild. This will auto-populate some fields on the template. And then I could say, fast ticket module. And that will populate all this information on the Scaffolder, and then I can create it. That's everything on the demo site. In terms of the other offerings we have here, for all these plugins, by the way, we have instructions on how to install in the READMEs. The other things we have set up, we have a module or a catalog plugin to ingest users and groups directly from the Okta API. There is an existing solution to do this from the LDAP API, and you can get LDAP set up with Okta, but for internal reasons, we wanted to go right to the Okta API itself. So this is just an entity provider that'll talk to Okta and grab all of your users. We have something set up for Slack catalog. Right now, that's just a user processor. This is how we stitch everything together. We get our users from Okta, but that doesn't have their avatars, which make Backstage a lot more fun. So based on the email that is set up from the Okta integration, but as long as you have an email that matches somebody's Slack email in your catalog, you can run this processor that will get the Slack user, put an annotation for their Slack ID, so you can send them DMs from other integrations really easily. And you can start seeing somebody's Slack picture where our users kind of most often update their avatars. And We also have an extension to the AWS catalog that lets us ingest RDS instances from AWS. And this is also something that probably could end up going back to the core AWS plugin. We built this in-house, so we thought we'd open source it as it is and then figure out where it lands. And yeah, those are our plugins. And the one I thought, because it's harder to show these catalog plugins in a toy app, I thought I'd do a really quick preview of what this looks like internally, isolating to like a walkthrough where I'm not exposing parts of our infrastructure that are internal. But if I go to our Backstage site, and again, a lot of this is always under construction, moving around. This is our actual Backstage instance running. You'll see some of the fun things we've done. We've customized our about card a bit where we show for each user like their merge requests on a system, and it shows the number of it. So I could be like, whoa, I have like a ton of merge requests here that I need to go and clean up. We use Renovate for dependency updates. So we can see all of the Renovate MRs that are set up for a system and click into that. We had some really great work to get our cost information front and center for a system so that engineers are more cost aware as they're going around in their systems. And we can see that Backstage luckily is not breaking the bank. Here is our Argo card down here, and that'll show the pods deployed. You can click around, you can view logs. But what I wanted to show is that if I look at who deployed this last application, I will see my user card, and this is all coming directly from Okta. All of my groups are coming from Okta. I have my awards for being a Backstage plugin developer, for being part of the holiday watch, which meant on call during the holidays. And then I can go into groups, and all this information is coming right from our API integrations without having to do it ourselves. That is it. And I just wanted to show you all how we have been building out Backstage and share some of these plugins that power our Backstage. Thank you.
This is awesome. This is awesome, Zach. Just wanted to clarify, there is a quick question that you got from Sebastian. If the Renovate MRs, is that a plugin or is that homegrown? You showed it in the about page there.
Yeah, that's homegrown. It's not. I'm not as open. It's we've kind of done what's recommended, which is fork off the about page into our own custom about page, and then add in tiles to that. So it's a little harder to figure out how to open source this. Happy always to share some code. The way we did this is we just add another it's some preset element. So we add one of these elements to the about card, and then we actually, based on annotations on our system, we hit the GitLab API, which is our code provider. We see how many merge requests there are by Renovate, and then add I think this is called a badge in Material UI, and then just link out to those directly. And if there's none, we just disable the link. But that's a little harder to share, but again, always happy to chat.
Yeah, echoing what Philip said in the channel there, you deserve a Demo Master award. So speaking of the awards plugin that you demoed, that was really, really nice, Zach. Thank you so much for sharing this, both to you and the team working on this. It's always nice to see how other Backstage implementations and instances look like. I'm willing to make a bet that it's going to take less than a few hours until somebody will request a feature request for the image there for some generative AI to bring some GIFs or something in there, but we can tag that separately.
Well, if you request a feature and you also have a pull request, that's the best way.
That's how it works. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this. Are there any questions for Zach before we move on to Andre? Thank you again for doing this demo.
For sure. And I'll drop the link in here too, if anybody wants to poke around.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Zach. Moving on to Andre, I believe you're next. Last but not least, did you want to steal the screen, or do you want me to quickly share the slide?
Just drop the slide. That works.
Wonderful. Give me 1 second. I'm very slow today. 1 second for some reason. Let me know if you start seeing my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. On to you, Andre. Thank you again, Zach.
Sure. This is just more information, sort of noting FYI. The CNCF, through their own processes, go through all the projects and review them and look at specifically around documentation. And so recently they completed a review of the Backstage documentation on backstage.io. And created a really helpful assessment with a ton of recommendations and suggestions, highlighting where we've got really strong points where we could make some improvements, which is really beneficial for us to give us a bit of focus on this. They've also logged several GitHub issues to help break that out. So definitely looking for community contributions towards working on those to get those recommendations in place and improve them. I posted in the chat the links to both the assessment and sort of the umbrella issue for these improvements. So very, very much looking for people to kind of join in and help us move that forward. I think we've already seen some action on the glossary already, which is great. That's a great improvement to what we have already. So like I say, more an informational moment than anything, but feel free to collaborate on those issues so we can help improve it.
Thank you so much, Andre.
Welcome.
Cool. That said, I think that concludes the formal agenda that we had. So that leaves us to the Q&A. Does anyone have, trying to catch up a little bit with the notes to see if there were any questions in the Q&A or chat? If not, feel free to come in, or I'm going to give a few seconds.
Hi, my name is Mark. I do have a question, and I don't know if I should type it or ask it, and I apologize for unmuting.
Feel free to go away. Go on.
In regards to the CNCF request, can we just grab any? Are they stack ranked in terms of which you would prefer to have done first? That was my question.
So no, we haven't gone that far. So I would say feel free to grab one, note that you want to work on it so that we're aware that you're picking it up. If you have questions about it, feel free to just include that in the issue. I will try my best to stay on top of those, seeing as I've asked people for help with them. Does that answer your question?
It does. I do have a follow-up question. Is there anybody at the CNCF that's a contact that put this request in? And the reason that I'm asking is because I'd like to ask them which doc is more important that they need updated. And I know there is a stack rank, and I just want to kind of know who that person is so I can see. Sometimes the architectural documents will be higher up their list. I'm familiar with the CNCF process. So that's my question. If we know who the contact was that.
So Dave Welsh was the person who did the assessment, if I'm remembering correctly, and they're on the GitHub issues, like they created the issue. So I think you could probably ping them.
Beautiful. I see that
any of
now.
it being done, I think, is terribly terribly appreciated. So like the ranking of it is not as critical from our perspective, at least.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
For sure.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Gonna wait for a few more seconds, and if not, we're happy to get some time back as well. Just gonna wait for a few more seconds, just in case somebody's typing or whatnot. Cool. If there are no more other comments or questions, just wanted to thank you all for joining today's February. Okay, there's a question coming up. 1 second. Are plugins available that Backstage.io plugins free and can be used at enterprise level? Patrick, do you want to take that one or?
Sure. So the plugin listing on the microsite on Backstage.io it's a link to then a large part of the Backstage plugin ecosystem. They're all free. None of those plugins are paid. There might be some of the plugins that integrate towards paid services. So you might not get value out of them unless you pay for some external service. But they are free. Whether they can be used at the enterprise level depends on what you mean by that. They're of a varying level of quality, all of the plugins. So you will want to really review the plugins yourself, try them out, and vet them yourself.
We got a thumbs up there, Patrick. Thank you. Cool. I'll wait for a little bit longer in case there are more questions being typed. All right. That said, thank you all for joining the February edition of the community session. Thank you all for the contributions, for covering the content. Again, a large shout out to Zach and the team at SeatGeek for showing us their Backstage instance. We hope to see you all next month for the Backstage Con Paris edition of the community session. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.